Okay, so thanks everyone for having me today. I'm happy to be here. I am based here in Boston, so it's not that big of a deal for me to come down 30 minutes south. That being said, I am responsible, my team of SAs are responsible for the machine learning ecosystem. And so, anyone has any questions afterwards, I'm definitely happy to talk to you about machine learning and how partners can actually help you on your journey with machine learning. But first and foremost, I do want to start and caveat things to say I am not a data scientist. However, I have been a solutions architect myself for several years. And part of when I talked to Chris about what would be some good topics to talk about today, I wanted to do an introductory level discussion on how to get started with machine learning. A couple of years ago, when I was just starting as a solutions architect, oftentimes a conversation I would have with potential customers would be, what is the right first workload for me to bring onto AWS? And of course, we definitely encouraged customers to start with dev and test, et cetera, things like that to just get started and get your feet wet. And so hopefully this discussion today will be somewhat similar as far as, what are the right things for you to start thinking about if you want to do machine learning. And of course, it really does start with data. So I'll caveat that as well and just say if you don't exactly do anything today with big data or not doing any analytics, you might not be ready for machine learning. But if you have some good data sets that you've been cultivating over the years, which I'm sure most of you do, that would be the right first place to start. So let's first set the stage here with some updated definitions on machine learning. So really, machine learning is a way for you to create predictive models that have tunable parameters. So really what you're going to do is use the data that you have in order to predict data that you don't have. And my team has been looking at lots of different data sets that customers and partners have been bringing us. And I'll give you just some examples. Recently, we were looking at some public data available from police public data, right? So they have lots of information on 911 calls. They had data around what kind of offense it was, what kind of call it was, where it was, what time of day it was. Gee, that's a really interesting data set to start with. But you want to look at that data and ask it a question. What are you trying to glean from the data that you do have? And so in that particular case, one really good question that you could ask that data is, what time of day do I maybe need to have more police on staff in order to address some challenges that might be happening in the community? So over time, we've also seen the dramatic fall in the cost of these predictions. Part of this is because of the value of compute, right? So we've seen, the cost of compute go down. And it's interesting, one thing I like to ask potential managers that I might interview for AWS is, why do you believe that big data is so important today in conjunction with the cloud? And the answer that I'm kind of looking for, I'm just looking for an understanding that big data has really been able to grow over time because of the cost of storage and also because of the different kinds of things that are actually producing big data. So obviously we have the World Wide Web with weblogs producing data, but also we have lots of sensors and IoT that are also producing data. And the cost of that is going down, and the diversity of big data is going up. And so all of these things are why we're really seeing a renaissance here with machine learning and AI, things that have actually been around for many, many years. Okay, so one of the books that the partner team, that my team really loves, is this book called Prediction Machines. I didn't reference it here, but something to take a look at. It's a book by A.J. Agarwal, and in this book, he really talks about the economics of machine learning. And if you think about economics, one of the things that is an important concept is substitutes and complements. So obviously, if the cost of coffee goes drastically down, drastically up, some of the substitutes and complements will also go up in price just due to the nature of economics. So that's why when we talk about machine learning, the value of your data is actually going to go up. I think some of you are here from companies such as in the insurance industry, as well as financial services companies. You guys are probably sitting on very, very valuable data that you can predict things from and glean some insights. And these are important when you're thinking about machine learning and where to start. So one thing to know also is that if you know the answer to the question that you're going to ask your data, you're probably just doing analytics. You're not doing machine learning. So what you want to be able to do is actually end up with more questions after you do some machine learning on your data as opposed to less. So let's talk about the machine learning stack here at AWS. So if we just start at the bottom, clearly we have the frameworks and infrastructure available on AWS. We have P3 instances, which will allow you to do the machine learning with the compute power that you will need. And then also we have tools such as IoT Greengrass, which can help you if your data source is going to be sensors and also mobile tools. I want to talk a little bit about some of the frameworks that you can actually use on AWS. Probably many of you don't know that you can run TensorFlow on AWS. Did you know that? I think that's something that people think of it as a Google framework, but you can run it on AWS in SageMaker. Of course, we also plug Apache MXNet, and we have other frameworks such as Caffe and PyTorch that you can run in AWS as well. And then I encourage you to look at our AWS Deep Learning AMI, something that you can get off of the marketplace, available to do some things right out of the box. And then we have a set of platform services, which again will help you to do machine learning on your data, such as SageMaker, the Deep Lens, the Amazon Machine Learning Framework, as well as other things that you can run, such as EMR and Mechanical Turk. And then finally, one of the things I think is a really good place to get started with machine learning is with some of our API services. So obviously we have recognition both with image and video, as well as Lex and Poly, transcribe, and translate and comprehend. And some of these services are built to work in conjunction with other services. So for example, Lex and our Amazon Contact Center Connect work really well together. And it's a good place to get started with machine learning. So this figure is actually from an article called Turning AI into Concrete Value, the Successful Implementer's Toolkit, and it's published by Capgemini. And this has just a quadrant here that you can see of different opportunities for doing machine learning and different things that you can think about. So chatbots. Many of you probably have organizations that are customer facing, and the cost of labor is quite high. So having someone be able to self-serve with a chatbot is a great way to engage with your customers. Visual recognition could be important to your organization. Metadata extraction. This is actually really important across many organizations. Anomaly detection. I think there's some speakers later today who are going to talk about security, especially on your network, your firewalls. That's a good place to think about injecting machine learning. Supply chain as well, and demand forecasting. Several of the use cases that I'll talk about in a little bit are around demand forecasting. Again, let's start with the obvious. So this chart, I'll just give credit, is from Forrester. It's the Global State of Artificial Intelligence, and it's a survey sent out to enterprise leaders to say, what are the biggest growth benefits that you see from AI in your organization? And you can see some of the things listed out here. Again, customer engagement, something that really most organizations have to think about. Improve existing services, also to be able to disrupt industry and also determine trends that they might not see very obviously. Cost reduction, and then of course personalization. Many of you have probably, as you've engaged online, seen improvement in personalization and recommendations that are presented to you. And then of course automation. I know there's going to be lots of talks today about improving automation in your organization, and machine learning can also help there as well. So one of the things that you're probably familiar, if you've seen a talk on big data, is the big data pipeline. So this is the machine learning workflow, and it also has similar steps. And so we'll start here all the way on the left. So pre-processing data is actually where you'll end up spending most of your time here. It's very important, and I think I've read where some people suggest that you're going to spend 80 to 90% of your time just on this step. And then of course you want to visualize that data to make sure it's what you're expecting. And then developing the model. And this is where some of the tools that AWS provides can help you. Training and deploy that model. And then of course you want to then take the results and integrate it into your broader platform. So we like to kind of show it like this, so you can think of it in the sense of services that we have. So again, you can think of your data sources or the places you're going to do pre-processing, such as Athena, DynamoDB, RDS, Redshift, etc. And then think of SageMaker as really, this place where you're going to develop, train, and deploy that model. And then where would you then integrate things? You can integrate them into API Gateway, your Alexa skills, Comprehend, Connect, Poly, etc. And then I wouldn't be part of the partner organization if I didn't also talk about partner solutions that are available. So again, we have a very strong partner ecosystem of companies that also can help here in the pre-processing of data, the visualization of data, and also the development and training of that model. I don't want to flip off that too fast if anyone wanted to look at that for one more minute. Are we going to post slides? I'd have to ask Chris, I think. I'm not sure. Well, I'll get back to you on that. Okay? I think so. Usually we don't do these events without doing that. So there's actually a paper out there called Tidy Data. It's written by this person, Hadley Wickham, who's the chief scientist at R Studio. Obviously, R is one of the big places where people do statistical modeling, machine learning. Data scientists are very familiar with R. And Hadley Wickham is definitely one of the big contributors to R. And so I'd encourage you to look at this paper if you have time, but just as a way to think about how to cleanse your data and get it in a good state so that you can actually do machine learning on it. There are some important key things to know. So obviously, everything that goes into a model has to be a numerical input. So you're going to have to do some mapping and transformations. And then, of course, in R, every column is a category and every row is considered an observation. So these are concepts that you have to know in order to do data science on top of this data that you have. And again, I'm not a data scientist. I'm not an expert in this space, but I also believe that you really have to spend a lot of time prepping that data to get it ready to get some insights out of it. So, and also, with feature selection, you're going to remove things that aren't really predictive, that are just some noise in your data set, et cetera. And again, good features enable a simple model to beat a complex model, something key to know here. So let's start with talking about some of our data pre-processing partners. So there's companies such as Alteryx, Figure 8, which used to be called Crowdflower, and then Databricks. And then we also have Paxata and Trifacta. So these 5 companies are part of our machine. In November of 2017 at reInvent, we launched a machine learning competency. And that competency was meant to go out and find software companies that were really ahead of the curve in helping customers to do things for machine learning. And so data pre-processing being one of the key factors here, these 5 companies really excelled in this space. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at them and consider them if you're going to take a data set and start to do some machine learning on it. And of course, I'll just kind of plug the machine learning software competency as a whole. When we set forth the competency, which my team actually put together, we set it out so that we'd have 3 different areas in which we'd highlight companies. And these companies do have different qualities and do different things, but these are the 3 categories that we put them in. So we have obviously the data pre-processing companies that really help you with annotations, generation of data, as well as wrangling of that data. And then there are several platforms that excel in helping you with data science and machine learning. So H2O, Databricks, Domino Data Labs, C3 IoT, Data Robot, a local company here. And then, of course, there are other companies that actually provide SaaS solutions and APIs built in so that you don't have to do the machine learning yourself, that you can just take advantage of those APIs. Companies such as Luminoso, Narrative Science, Veritone, and Anodot. So again, if you're going to do data integrations, first you should think about using MXNet's Record IO format exporting, something that will help you to get that data in the right format that you need. Know that Jupyter can be launched independently, so you can use lots of different frameworks that you might want to in order to, inside of SageMaker, and that you're not limited to MXNet. Containerization is actually pretty important. So for existing models that you're going to deploy and have APIs for, you want to think about containerizing those because of the sort of the scale that you might need to execute them. And then also create pipelines so that if you adjust your model, you can get a new one out there to another endpoint pretty quickly. And then S3 actually hosts a set of data sets that you could look at. If you don't feel comfortable with the data sets maybe that you've been cultivating, perhaps you look at some of the S3 data sets and start there to start experimenting with machine learning. And then also, we have several marketplace solutions. So here, obviously, some of them are data solutions that will help you with the wrangling. But there's also APIs and SaaS solutions that you can look into to get started. So some of you may think, well, gosh, I can't think of a place where machine learning would be applicable in my organization. But there's really something for everyone to consider when it comes to machine learning. I mean, first and foremost, microsegmentation. A lot of us work in customer-facing organizations, and we need to know more about our customers and how can we categorize them. And machine learning can really help in that area. And then, of course, there's dynamic content delivery. You want to be able to personalize an experience for customers, whether it's an online experience or some other type of experience. And Dynamic content delivery and personalization is another really good place to get started. So, some markers to kind of remember, and I think I'll plug Tim Harney's presentation later today on getting started with AI and ML. Really, you should have some big data in your organization to get started with before you can really do some machine learning. Do you have a transaction data set? Are you using EMR today? If the answer is yes, then you might be ready to get going. Another marker is, are you using IoT? Sensor data is so rich that you can really use that as a basis for any machine learning. And then, of course, are you already doing some kind of business intelligence, such as analytics and forecasting? And more importantly, what is the impact, the critical impact of that on your business? For some businesses, it's actually super important. So I'll actually dive a little bit into a use case. So Allied Vans, I think probably most of you would not think of this as a company doing hardcore machine learning, but surprisingly, they actually are. They're using a consulting partner, Paraveda, and they had all of this historical data going back to 2011 on information about what is the forecast capacity and demand. And really, this in the past had been a really manual and labor-intensive thing for them to do. And so they worked with Paraveda to unlock some capacity planning as well as forecasting on how could they do a better job of getting their fleet organized for the seasonality that just was natural in moving. And so they used SageMaker to train and optimize a model, and then they exported it to run on an endpoint using EC2. So sorry, I'm cheating and using my notes here on this one because I don't have all of the details, but they actually used XGBoost with Amazon SageMaker hyperparameter optimization to go and tune that model with that data that they had. And so they were actually able to train that model to predict demand in pounds that they had to transport across the country. And so a really interesting use case, and as you see, they started with one of those markers, which is that they really needed to do analytics, forecasting, and demand. And it was something that was hampering their business, and they've seen improvement on this with using SageMaker. So another pretty well-known use case is the NFL. So the NFL is actually using RFID tags on their players. And again, this is another one of those markers, the IoT marker, right? So they're using that to track and predict routes that players might be running. So on Sunday, when you're seeing, players know that that data from those sensors is being beamed up to the cloud, and then people are running models on that and predicting running routes for wide receivers on Sunday. So, and this also is really, part of the reason why the NFL is really investing in this is much like, the next gen stats on, the Major League Baseball StatCast. It's just a way to engage more with their user base, right? I mean, isn't it cool to kind of see predictions on if this player would have gone and run a different route, what would be a different outcome? And it really has more engagement with their viewers. All right, so if you've thought about your data, you've thought about what you have, what should you do now? So probably the really good first place to start is the AWS Machine Learning blog and podcast content. There's a wealth of information there, more than you can get in just a 30-minute talk here with me, and something where you can think about what is the right first place for you to start. There's also lots of public GitHub repos. This is where we've produced a lot of sample code, and we're going to actually be doing more and more of this going forward. Because I think we know that there's only so many data scientists around, and we need to kind of get you started with some samples on things to try. And then you should also just really start building some sample models. Use SageMaker. Try with the sample notebooks. Try with your own data and try to kick up your own notebook. Again, then study and tidy up your data. This is really, again, where you're going to spend most of your time. And it's a really good exercise in not just thinking about your data, but also thinking about what kind of insights you want to glean from your data. And then especially if you're doing anything with sensors, which you may or you may not be, but if you have anything that could be driven by IoT, try to discover Greengrass and Mobile Hub as a way for you to start working with that sensor data. And so again, I'll plug the machine learning competency. So back in November, we did the competency for technology partners. And then earlier this year, I believe it was mid-March, we launched a consulting partner competency. And this is something that we really try to do for our customers because we know that you may or may not have the staff on hand with the talent that you need in order to move on some of these initiatives that you want to do. And so we vetted a set of consulting partners. I believe actually there's about 20 of them now, who we can, with confidence, recommend for you to take on that first machine learning project. And they range from big GSIs such as Accenture and Deloitte to smaller systems integrators such as Paraveda, as I mentioned earlier, Slalom, and a couple of others. And there's some, they're global too. So we have some based in EMEA, some based here in the US, of all sizes to help you on this journey of doing machine learning. So here's just some resources, and I apologize because these are all links. But if, so Chris, actually, someone had asked earlier, are we going to send out the presentations? Yes. Okay, so good. So on this last screen, it's basically a lot of getting started material, right? So there's videos, tutorials on using SageMaker. It's other really good articles and blog posts to get you thinking about it and get you started. And then, of course, some of the other frameworks, if you want to try them out, like such as Keras, documentation, etc., Gluon, MXNet, depending on the direction you want to go. And then another thing I really encourage you to look for is Fast AI. I'm going to plug Jeremy Howard. He is a really fantastic evangelist for machine learning. I would look at his stuff. He can get you going, get you started with machine learning, and look at his site, Fast AI. And that's it. I feel like I went a little bit too short, so I apologize. I slowed down as much as I could, but I have time for questions if anybody has any. So hopefully this was helpful in just getting you thinking about starting on machine learning. And I really encourage you to look at your data as step one. Okay? Any questions? Yeah?